Exactly.
I just think of like what it is.
Yeah.
I'll say what
So you said right. Oh my god.
Oh, my gosh. You don't have a course like that though. I mean, I'm just trying to justify taking away the
Oh yeah.
Can I have lunch at the bottom?
You know,
So I can just scoot around.
Right.
Good. Anyway, I have to figure out, well, because I'm trying to get you to get these people to get prerequisites. Well, you know, there has to be.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's annoying though.
Well.
Exactly. So I'm like, kind of, you know, right now. Yeah.
That's like.
Right. Oh, right. Until it's like.
Good.
Like not maybe talk about.
Oh, I know.
It's like taking rock climbing and then like when you take on this one. He's like, this is nice.
Oh, yeah.
I'm assuming there's like a process to like when you set up for it, kind of like how like just like that process for like Airbnb and stuff. I don't know what the cost is.
Right. But see, I think it's just like.
Yeah.
It's my nice.
I know you have like. Did you just get this job like this?
Or like my
9 months ago.
just to make sure to really have that. This is true.
Especially we're trying to. And they should really bad work stuff. Okay, but she from what I've heard. So when I can finally live together and so like I wonder what the talk about just a super manager. I usually do because I used to work at a nursing home, so I had they really strict. But now they don't. I always get which I know is like technically the best. But it's different for like everyone. Yeah, probably just avoid an immigration. He's gonna be one. There's a lawyer. Yeah, an immigration.
Even though we can drive.
Charlotte's pretty different though. Like that's when I
Emails from financial people.
No, I was sort of looking.
It just came in.
Oh, okay, I missed it then. Is there any, any,
Between the money.
yeah, I was gonna.
There is an option in here where we don't receive any of the money, I thought.
And then do the same with that.
They list out pretty clearly where it's going, so now take a look.
Oh, okay.
So much.
What were you gonna say?
I gotta go.
I gotta leave.
I interrupted you.
No, I was gonna.
About to say something.
No, I was wondering if there was any progress on that, because I wanna start the outreach.
I know.
We can disagree. That's okay. Like,
She wants to
Kelly was gonna price out, I sent her the, she was gonna try to get some prices. She bought some food and stuff. But I haven't heard from her.
everything
I
that she
don't
says she
know
knows do too.
doing anything at all while she's out, but she is, you're talking to her?
It's really bad because I feel like I'm not answering chat.
For work, so I guess.
She was kind of
Yeah. Guilty about that one.
Oh yeah.
I don't think she missed it. I mean, she's not, she's the chair.
She seems like someone that.
Yeah, I told her, I mean, she said she had with her arm, so she couldn't drive.
Right. Someone the other day was like,
Really?
That's not across the board.
I'm glad to hear you're getting this other way.
I was really
You were exhausted?
Yeah.
I caught a
Oh
cold.
my god, and then the year she graduated, before you know it, so good, like, they got so much information to be like,
To add insult to injury.
Fluctuations, right?
yeah.
A lot of people were sick that day.
And he's not bound to an employer. So he's come back to
I'd much rather be busy than sitting somewhere for 2 days.
Meditation.
That's hard for me.
Like I said, you all are welcome to take my this time as we go through that.
So we usually start at 12:30. I don't know when I get to my turn, it's like, wait, what do I do?
Whatever, yeah, if it was the other way around, though, I'd probably cry, like, that's.
Yeah, right.
Never, don't try never.
That's why it's all right.
Hopefully I don't have food on my face. You guys would tell me, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't let me be up here with Indian food all over. So I guess we'll get started.
Thank you all for coming to our October luncheon. The food is from India Gate, and today we'll be talking about international field placements with Dr. Laura Lewis. And another quick thing is this month we have composting. So all your extra food that you know, that's on your plate and the plates itself, there's some black bins out in the hallway. You can just throw the whole thing in and your fork can either go in the recycling bin or the garbage. So yeah, the napkins can go, that they're not, wait, the napkins are composting.
Just go in the trash.
Yeah, so, thank you all for coming and we're excited to learn about and ask questions about international field placements.
Thank you for coming, everyone. I apologize, I have a little bit of a cold, so I sound a little bit nasally, but you can all hear me, right? Okay. Are many of you interested in international field placement or just international in general?
Yes.
If I have to talk after I ate, you guys do too. A combination of both. Well, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what the value of international opportunities in social work are. And I have colleagues here who know as well or better than I do about that, so I'll invite them to join in too. But there really is great value in pursuing exposure to international content as a social worker through study abroad or international internships. I'll talk about some of those different types of opportunities in a moment, but does everybody have a handout? I've listed a few things here. Learning about social welfare practices in other countries is one of the values. Understanding the impact of social issues such as poverty in other contexts, and cultural learning and the development of ethno-relativism. But if you think about it, as issues are increasingly global perspectives are more often needed to solve these issues. Pollution, for example, in North America affects air quality in other parts of the world. Pesticides off the coast of Argentina could affect fishing stocks off the coast of Australia. And another example, Oxfam predicts that the cost of food will double by the year 2030. And it really is overconsumption in the West that causes that problem. Is technology the answer, or is the answer more equitable distribution of wealth? Social workers should be involved in finding these solutions. So what do people think about that? The idea that policy decisions here can affect other parts of the world. Do you agree with that? And social work is one of the few helping professions that looks at policy alongside helping people, so I think we have a particular place in this arena. My colleague who teaches international social work is here too, and other colleagues have done international work. Does that kind of sum up what the value is, you think, of being aware of international issues, pursuing international opportunities? Is there anything you'd want to add to that? At some point, not right this second, but
Well, I mean, I always kind of say that we see, I mean, even this theme, global to local. A lot of these, global, like Laura was pointing out in some of the examples, but I mean, we see it in the migration here. I mean, so many different, issues that propel people to have to leave, and they're very much tied in with policies and.
yeah, sometimes U.S. policy is causing people to flee their countries. Guatemala, for example, farmers who are unable to grow poppies anymore. The government has intervened, and so are fleeing and coming to the U.S. because they're not able to earn income anymore. So keep in mind that international opportunities encompass a range of things. Advocacy work here and around the globe. Professional exchange that can happen later in your career. You don't have to necessarily get experience and exposure now. International practice and international policy development and advocacy. So when students come to me and they're interested, oftentimes they talk about international field first. That's usually the first thing that's on their mind. But I like to talk about a range of options because international field placements is not always feasible for everyone. If you're going to do field abroad, and I'll talk more about what that process entails, it does tend to be a little costlier. Students generally spend between $3,000 and $5,000 because you're paying for airfare and you're also looking for housing when you're there on the ground. So that's sometimes a little more costly than students can manage. There is a way that students can have their student loan amount increased though. I can write a letter advocating for that, and we spell out what your costs are, and you can get your loan amount increased. Study abroad is the option more often students end up doing with us. We don't have a study abroad in our school currently. We run them. Philomena has taken students to Italy. I took students to Moldova one semester. But there are other study abroad options at UB. There's a Health in Brazil, one that our students have gone on in the summer. And then, of course, there are other social work study abroads that other schools of social work host and our students can participate in. A popular one that a couple of our students have done is in Germany around human rights, and there's another one in South Africa that our students have done. Those tend to be a little bit more affordable, and I think one of the benefits is you're traveling with other social workers, so the framework you're using to sort of analyze and think about the culture and issues that you're presented with, I think is a very helpful one. The other thing about study abroad is that you can fill out paperwork with Dr. Kim. I don't know if you all know, Dr. Kim is the MSW director. To have a study abroad count as an elective, so it can free up some of your coursework to do other things. Dr. Kim is also the person that catalogs all of the study abroad opportunities as they come through. If a student comes to me, I'm usually saying, well, as a step, talk to ESOC first and see what study abroad opportunities are available. because those tend to happen in summer or during winter session, they can be a little easier for students to fit in their schedule. So that's one option, study abroad. Any questions about that? The other option, of course, is an international themed placement in our local community. We usually have a few students every year, I would say, that we think, Katie, not a huge number, but a few that are interested in international populations, say, working with refugees and immigrants. And we've never had students, I don't think, not be able to work with those populations locally. We have placements at the International Institute, and I won't remember them all off the top of my head, but we have a few. So that's another way to get exposure to international issues. UB also has a volunteer program that they love our students to participate in and be volunteers for. It's the International Student Mentoring Program. And actually, quite a few of our students do that every year. So if you're interested, if you want to reach out to me, I can give you the contact information for that. But you're basically paired up with a student from another country and providing support to them. They really like our students because they say, oh my gosh, you have a group of students who want to be helpful. And our students tend to do a really nice job. So. And then, of course, finally, there's international field placement. So let me tell you a little bit more about that. When we place students abroad, I follow pretty closely a framework that was developed by Benjamin Lau, his name is. He wrote an article about principles of effective practice in international social work field placements. So students and I work together to identify where you would do a placement, and it's critical that we find a place where students can really do meaningful work. So we're not just looking for a slot where students can be plugged in, we're looking where students can add value. That process takes place in a collaborative way. You're giving me ideas, I'm reaching out, and when I speak to organizations, I'm very careful about here are the kinds of projects our students have done. What do you have that might be similar, or what might we do that can be helpful to you? And what Benjamin Lau says about that is if students aren't doing meaningful work, it's likely that the learning isn't really going to be there. So that's very important to us. The other thing is, and I think most of you know this, even from doing field locally, that reflection is a really important part of your learning, right? And I'm usually in field lab encouraging students to keep journals about the work that they're doing. Even very sophisticated practitioners have a way of reflecting about their work. While you're abroad, I'm asking you to do a journal, and I assign somebody here locally, usually a faculty member or sometimes a practitioner has done it, but somebody who's more closely familiar with the work that you're doing abroad. Philomena has done it a couple of times, I think. Once you were the supervisor for our student in the Dominican Republic.
Right.
Am I right about that?
Yep.
Okay. We've had, how many students? I think when I count, it's about 15 or 16 students have done this in about the last 10 years or so. So not that many, one or two on average a year. So for example, that student was in the Dominican Republic, and Philomena was the person assigned on this end. We're very careful to make sure that students have adequate supervision on the ground, but it may not be that that person is a social worker. So I feel strongly it should be a social worker here, and that person is monitoring the work that you're doing through your journal and looking at that reflection piece and helping you make sense of the work that you're doing. Let's see here. So I thought I would share with you a variety of things that our students have done, and then I'll talk about the process that we go through, the more logistical piece, and see if you have questions. Our first student who went abroad, it was in 2011. We were just talking about this at our retreat, actually, and I thought it was more like 2008 or 9, but it really was just 2011. It used to be that our university university wasn't very supportive of the idea of our students doing work overseas. You're practicing social work. So we had to kind of go through some advocacy efforts to have them change that for us. You know, they had a very rigid affiliation agreement that agencies overseas would have to sign, and so we had to deal with all of that. But our first student, Stephanie, went in 2011. She had been a Peace Corps volunteer in Macedonia, and she went back to do a different kind of work this time in Macedonia. She knew the language and she knew the culture, but she wanted to work with victims of trafficking. So that's what she did that semester. And that early experience really shaped for me how I continued to structure programs for our students. Because I realized, even for somebody like Stephanie, who knew the culture very well and knew the language very well, that supervision piece on our side was incredibly important. Because there are cultural pieces about the way social workers respond in country that sometimes we might not be able to translate well, or we may need help thinking about. And you're dealing with sometimes very difficult issues, vulnerable young women, many of them returning home after the program that they participated in. In 2013, and again, these are just a couple, but one of our students, Sarah, worked with the Burma Borders Project, which looked after the mental well-being and social welfare of refugees in Myanmar. She had actually traveled in that region before. She was familiar with that area, and she was interested in working with displaced populations like refugees. So, and another student, Katie, worked with an organization in South Korea called the Korean Unwed Mothers Support Network. So I learned a lot from her in that case because there's a human rights issue around being a single mother in South Korea, that there's a lot of social pressure not to keep your infant. So I think that's the one that that Uksu oversaw. We had a couple of students do this actually. So she was very passionate, our student was very passionate about those issues. And she didn't have experience abroad. The student then, there were two students that did this, but the one that I'm thinking of, she spent a lot of time learning about the culture and taking language classes here.
And she was an adoptee
Yeah,
from
she
Korea
was.
that she wrote about in her journal.
So she and I talked a lot about that and worked together very closely because we know when we have a personal issue that we're very close with, it's hard to separate. So we really did a lot of work around that before she left. Okay, so let's see. I wanted to pull up for you, are all of you familiar on our website where the student blogs are about their international placements? I have it on the handout for you where you can find it. But there are many, many more examples that you can look at if you're trying to get ideas for yourself. So I have to share the screen.
Oh, it's shared.
It is shared?
Yes.
Okay. Is anybody even on here?
It's just me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was testing it out.
So this is the student I talked about in the photo that was in Myanmar, in the border. That's Sarah. And then if you look below, look at all of these other ones. We've had a couple of students go to the Dominican Republic. We had a student go to Canada. That was kind of an unusual one. We hadn't necessarily thought about that before as an international placement, but it's not that easy as a US citizen to go to Canada and do this. So she wrote about in her blog some comparisons about the different policies. Student in Germany, Moldova, India, Dominican Republic again, Tanzania. So we've had quite a few, and they're not all listed here. Not all of our students who've gone abroad have done blogs. All right. So you have that as a resource. So I want to say a little bit about what it really takes to be successful if you are going to do this. It takes a lot of patience because sometimes we're working together to locate a placement for many months. It doesn't always happen quickly. And there's a certain point in the year where we say, you know, as of June 1, we're going to stop and maybe revert back to a local placement. And then, of course, our office would do everything to make sure that you were in a good placement locally. I even ask you to give me local choices in case something happens and you change your mind, and we can go back to those. Determination, tolerance of ambiguity, things that you're all familiar with as social work students, and flexibility, because there are no guarantees. So you know how sometimes you go into field and you think you know what you're going to do and you end up doing something very different? That can happen here too. That can happen when you're going abroad for field. So for example, our student Natalie, who was in India, really wanted to be doing humanitarian work. She knew that there would be a research component, but it ended up being that she did predominantly research. I think she still really found it valuable. She told me that she still found it valuable, and I know they really found her contribution meaningful. And then our student Sarah that I showed you, who was doing the Burma Borders project, she really wanted to do counseling. She wanted to do more clinical work. What she ended up doing mostly, along with some counseling, was educational kind of programs like you see in the picture. So you have to be flexible. And like I mentioned earlier, there is a greater cost if you're going to do international field. So if a student proceeds with this, once we find a placement, I can request consideration from the dean for a scholarship. And she's been giving about $1,000 stipend. In return, students are asked to blog about their experience. So there is that little bit of money that you can get. It's applied towards tuition, so it's not like money in hand. And then we had one student who went to the Dominican Republic, who is the only one that I know of who was able to get some funding from our School of Public Health. So I'm not entirely familiar with that process, but that would be something that we could look into for other students too. And it wasn't a lot of money, it was just maybe a couple of $1,000, just it's significant and helped offset the costs. So there's a checklist that I use when I meet with students. I don't want to pass this out because you'd all be very scared. It's not like students do this on their own, but we start it together and it just keeps us on track for the year. So the very first step is meeting with me by November 1st. And pretty soon you'll be hearing from the field office about submitting your field application for next year. And where it says geographic region, you can put international. And then your materials come to me. So that's the very first step. And then once we meet together, there are other preliminary things that I have you do. And one of them is meeting with student services. They're very helpful. They map out for you what would your courses look like if you were abroad in your last semester. That's very possible to do because our faculty a number of years ago organized a curriculum so that it would be possible. You'd be taking a lot of your classes ahead of time, and then you would be doing a block placement in spring or summer in your last semester.
What does block placement mean? I don't think
It
I've
means
ever.
all of your advanced year hours, 480 in one term, in one semester, between January and May. And the dates that we look at are very individual for students. Students often leave right after the holiday, and then I make them come back in time for graduation. Because I think one of the things that happens when you're abroad your last semester is you can feel disconnected, and I want you to come back for graduation and have that kind of closure. That's all of the early stuff. There are a couple of recommendation forms I ask students to do for me. Those are all in the field portal. There's only one form really, but you have a faculty member do it for you, you have your liaison do it for you, and you have your field educator do it for you. And then, of course, the finding the right placement for you, working with the organization on the activities that you'll be doing, and then leading up to your departure, things like visa. So I don't help students necessarily with all of that, but I make sure that you know what's next and what needs to be completed before you go. One thing I didn't mention, and have any of you been abroad before? And it's not necessarily that you need to have been abroad to experience this, but the importance of cultural humility, right? I think that's even important here. The idea of not privileging our own experience and being curious as we approach people. It's especially important when you're working with other cultures. So I'm not sure if you're all aware of this resource we have. Philomena and I have an institute together on sustainable global engagement. And we have this resource on cultural humility that can help prepare students for going abroad, but I mean for even working with local practice. So you can find that on our website too, but I don't think I have that as a resource on here. I'll have to add that. All right, so we're almost at the point of asking questions. I'll end just by saying that we have a couple of projects currently. The first, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to involve students soon. It's a project in Haiti that Philomena and I and Dr. Kelly Patterson have, but our ideas, we're working towards that. Maybe next year, I don't know, it might be optimistic because the political climate in Haiti is not very good right now. And then I recently came back from Rwanda. I took a trip in June, and there are a number of organizations there that would be really interested in having our students, and an organization that would help facilitate that for us through the University of Rwanda. So what I hope to do going forward is I always meet students where they're at first, like a good social worker. And students are often very passionate about a particular region, and we can start there. But then we also have placements where we've currently had, where we've had students before. And then in the future, I hope to really focus on areas where we have faculty involved and people involved in our teaching and our research. So that's my presentation. I figured you would all have questions, so I'll turn it over to you now. Yes.
For the coursework before we would be going abroad, if it happened, do we finish it like during the spring or nope, during the like between semesters doing classes,
Yeah,
or is
students
it
haven't had to do that. It's just that you're loading up on classes a
During
little
the actual
differently. So when students are in field that fall and you're not, you would be taking your courses then. I think it really is advisable to take the International Social Work course if you're going to do that, and maybe Philomena can share a little bit about that. She teaches the International Social Work course.
Just so happy to have some.
And she just happens to have a flyer.
Registration is coming up very soon, so I, was gonna
No, I'm
distribute
glad
this.
you brought it, yes.
But this is an excellent complement to an international, preparation actually.
Many of our students who've gone abroad have taken it, and
Yes, and because, I'll pass this around, but as you will see, that you have a chance to really do some in-depth research on a country and region of your choice. And we do a lot of, comparative work as well. So, for instance, the woman who went to Germany, she took the class and she researched Germany. And she really felt that it was really great, if we look at it through a human rights lens, a social development lens, sustainability, looking at social work in that country and the policies in that country. And so it really, you get there and you have I think a good foundation for beginning some of the work. I don't know if no one's ever done this, but this class has been, it was converted to online, so it's completely online, so.
you could do it from abroad.
Yes, I think if
We might have had
one was, no one's done that yet, but I do think that, that would also be a great thing, and I've always hoped someone would do that, because I think for the class itself, it'd be fascinating to have someone, in the field, participating. We do a lot of work on Flipgrid, a lot of discussions, and so it would be very rich to have somebody who's actually in the field. But I love teaching this course, and, a lot of times, students, are very interested, but sometimes they kind of worry about, marketability, and like, it's not a clinical course, it's more a macro kind of course, although we do talk, we watch the Culture of Humility, videos, we talk, we do some, work analyzing our own selves in terms of how we might, respond to certain circumstances in the field. But it's more, it's a lot of skills in research, in, comparative work, looking at policies, thinking about human rights, things like that.
I think it's a good foundation for students.
And I just wanna say, I'm working on right now, trying to get it, it's an elective right now, but hopefully by the end of the semester, it's going to be a, advanced topic, so, cause that might be something that sort of precludes people from taking it, so I'm trying to get it shifted, so.
What is that course called, Nina?
It's right now, it's an elective.
Oh.
And so, but you're
Oh, I see
entitled to
what you're
take
saying.
3 electives, but
That
I'm
course,
trying to
okay.
get it classified as a advanced topic, which it
Yeah.
really actually is, because it's kind of policy.
Yeah, it is.
Policy focused, macro policy.
And what's the advantage of that? If it's advanced?
I've had students say that they had to, they wanted to take the course, but they needed another advanced topic.
okay.
So it would just broaden, the accessibility for people, they could plug it in at different spots in their.
So there are many of our faculty who have done international work, and you heard a little bit from Phil and Nina. I think that if you spoke with Professor Weaver or Professor Kim, and there are many others, I think an important first step sometimes is to talk to faculty and hear about their experience doing research or teaching or service abroad. And that might help you fine tune what your ideas are. Many students then come back to me with a better idea of what it is they would like to do. And sometimes our students imagine that they'll have a career maybe doing international social work. And I try to sway them from, not to be pessimistic, but it's really important to have language skills if that's what you hope to do. So something you could be doing now while you're working on your MSW, you might be working on language skills rather than going abroad. There's a lot of competition for those positions, and a second language is really important, unless you're going to an English-speaking country, obviously.
Could I put an add-on there? Once a year, the school in the spring offers an opportunity to go to Social Work Day at the United Nations.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something that you apply for funding, but it's in the form of reimbursement. So you'd have to pay your own plane fare, get down there on your own. Usually it's an overnight. There's a morning session at the UN where you hear from international social work organizations. And then in the afternoon or the night before, there's a student session that talks about employment at the United Nations, qualifications for that, other opportunities. So that's something to watch for. I'll be announcing that in the spring semester.
Nice. So there are many rich and rewarding international kinds of experiences right here at home too. That's what I'll end with. Students that would like to talk with me further, please email me. My email is lalewis@buffalo.edu. I'm always happy to meet with you, even if you're just, thinking about it in a very preliminary way. And I can go into a little bit more detail about what's involved. And don't forget that ESOC is the person if you're interested in studying abroad. Yes.
I had a question about international placements for advanced placement.
Oh, if you're an advanced year student?
If you're
Or I
going
mean,
to be.
advanced standing?
Yeah. Oh, no. Like, so right now is our foundation
Yeah.
placement, and then the next one after that would be the
Advanced,
advanced.
yes.
So specifically, I'm looking to do clinical work and go for the C after graduation. But my thought process is I got my first master's in Toronto, to go back to Toronto and continue working there, but in a different way.
Oh,
So is that something that's even possible to do, like a clinical placement?
it's something we could talk about,
Okay.
certainly. Are you a Canadian citizen?
I'm not,
Oh, okay.
but my plan is to apply after graduation.
Oh, okay. Well, we can talk about that. There could be some barriers. That we internships in Canada, it's considered work, and so there are some visa-related situations. But from our perspective, doing a placement in Canada is fine.
And is that something that, I guess we'd have to talk about it, but it could potentially either be like the 2-week placements, you get so close, or could that
Oh, I
be
see.
like a full, like a, one of the block placements that you were talking about?
Yeah, we could talk about that.
Okay,
What is
so
more
does that-
feasible for
Okay.
you? I think that would be really cool if we could work that out. The student that I mentioned who went to Canada did have a parent that lived in Canada, so that was how we got around it. Years before, we ran into some problems with a student who wanted to be in Canada and it didn't work out. I found out later that there's somebody at UB that might have been able to help us with immigration. I don't know if that person's still willing or available, but you would think it would be easier, right? We used to have a Canadian American Studies certificate too that student had done. So that was really helpful, and the university does not have that anymore. Yes.
What is the shortest amount of time that a block placement can be done in?
It's very individual. I mean, I would want to come up with a plan with a student. It is possible that a student could only be on the ground in another country for, say, 6 to 8 work weeks. I don't imagine it being less than that, though, but say 6 to 8 weeks. And then you would be doing work here locally around that placement theme. Our student who went to Macedonia worked at the International Institute as a volunteer for, I think, maybe 4 or 5 weeks, and then was on the ground in Macedonia for lesser time. So we can work out things like that.
Of the dozen or so that have gone abroad, do we know what their current employment
We
is? or-
haven't done a good job of tracking that. You know, I think overall we don't do a great job of tracking where our students end up. There are a few students that I hear from time to time, and I'll often connect students that are interested in going abroad to some of them strategically. Like if I have a student who wants to go to India, I would reach out, you know, to former students, and they've always been very helpful that way. But I don't know where people have ended up. That would mean another staff person in my office.
There you go.
I know Sarah's working, the one that went to,
She's
she's in the
is.
Bronx, like she's working
Yeah.
in oh my gosh, she's changed. She was working in a health
Yeah.
community-based.
The placement in the Dominican Republic is with CSA Community Service Alliance, so it's more macro in nature, community service projects, but there is a language component for students who have some Spanish. That's a really good option. So we have 2 students like that. You need some Spanish though, but you get very good at Spanish by the time you're done. The program that we have in India is with Tata Institute, and they have a really nice international study in India program. So you're working with some Indian students, but other students from around the globe. And I like that because in a country like India, there's a lot of support that surrounds the student. You're working on campus, you're working with faculty. So there are some things I steer students towards, like for example, those 2 things. If they've not been abroad before, they're interested in India, or they have some Spanish and they want to get better. Jamie, you first and then Hillary.
Okay. Could students do an international field placement through another college that their social work department has an international placement?
Yeah, we've never done that. I don't know how that would work, if you would have to register, if they would allow you to. It's come up once before where somebody told me that, you know, they knew of a university that had all of these great programs, and I encouraged them to look into it, and then they never heard anything more about it.
Oh, okay. Cause I know that, Brockport, which is also a SUNY school, has a great Vietnam.
Oh yeah, our
Social
students
work.
have done that program.
Okay,
Because that's another SUNY school, that's kind of an easy one,
right.
where we've set that up for students. Did you come from Brockport?
I did, yeah, and I didn't
Okay.
do my placement there, but they had a 6-week shortened version of
Yeah.
it that I did. It didn't count for placement hours, but it was 6 credits, and
Yeah.
it was all social work based, and so.
Right, yeah, I'm familiar with that program.
Yeah, it's a great program, if anyone's interested.
Yeah, we've
but-
definitely let our students do that for field, and they're on the ground long
years ago, there was recognition that for some students coming back from international placements, there were some readjustments or some re-entry issues.
Yeah.
And at one point, there were also supports for that. I think somebody who had
Always.
been with the Peace Corps
Yeah.
maybe gathered people. Can you speak
Yes.
to whether we're still?
I think
Doing
that
that,
reentry piece is very important, so I've collected a lot of resources around that, and I ask students to meet with me when they come back, so we can talk about the transition. And what I've done is I've had the person who's overseeing their placement, or if not, that person, then Stephanie is a person who was in the Peace Corps, and she did her field placement in Macedonia. She's worked with students upon their return and stayed involved with them as they transition back. The Peace Corps has a very good tradition, a very sound tradition of helping people integrate back. And so she borrows from that and some of the materials she and I have developed to help students. It can be difficult. It's quite a long time to be away from home. And, there's a lot of excitement about returning, but it's often hard to kind of process with people what's happened in 3 to 4 months, so we have some practical tips like how to have the 3-minute elevator speech, because sometimes that's all people wanna hear, but you could go on for hours, and it can be kind of hard for people. But thank you for asking, yeah. I'm really proud of our program. I think we've really developed it around what is best practice. It's not a terribly large program, but for our students who've done it, I think we've done a really nice job. We've had some great students.
One thing I'd suggest because there are international bodies, there's an international Association of Social Work. And there's also an International Federation of
Federation.
Schools of Social Work.
Yeah, IASSW is the Schools of Social Work,
Mhm.
and then the IFSW is the International Federation of Social
Yeah.
Workers.
And so that's
yeah.
something to just, look up their website,
Yes,
Cause often they'll raise, issues around, sustainable development goals or something like that,
Yes.
they'll come out with position,
Yes.
statements. And so that's another resource, just get a sense
Yeah.
of international social work.
yeah, that's a
Parameters.
really good idea, Pat. It is possible too to look into doing placements with international organizations, say like UNICEF, or that's what's coming to mind quickly, but the Carter Foundation does work abroad. But they often have their internship structure, their application processes online, and they're pretty rigid processes that you have to follow, and sometimes our structure doesn't quite line up with theirs. Something that we have to look at closely. For example, they may only send students a certain time of year to certain places, and we have to kind of look closely at what those organizations do.
Finding a placement that has international focus, one thing I'm thinking of is a professor of social work is on the US representative, to the UN Commission on the Status of Women. So looking, Christy Holmes.
Yeah.
And, so, that would be something where you'd be working on policy basically,
Yeah.
and looking at, what the US is doing, but what all other countries are doing too.
Ooh, I would
And
like that.
I'm thinking even
That would be
legislatively,
fun.
and again, this is about connections and, connecting the dots too. If you're working at a federal, legislator's office, even at their local, office, Schumer or Gillibrand or, the Congress reps that in the House of Reps that we have, that's another avenue to, it's not abroad, it's not 100% international, but you can certainly, look at what's happening around there.
Yeah, good ideas.
We
I
actually,
may enlist Pat to work with me going up.
we actually did have that one placement that Sarah decided with, my God, I can't think of the name of the group,
Oh,
domestic workers in India.
union.
And she
Yeah.
could not, she really wasn't able to go abroad because she has kids, and so she did work, helping
was for fundraising.
Yeah, right, she did official fundraising.
Yeah, that was actually an
She wrote some grants, yeah.
international placement here that Philomena oversaw, and we can look at things like that too. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm sorry you had to listen to me with my cold. I hear myself. I feel like I sound awful, but thank you for being patient. I look forward to seeing some of you if you want to talk further. Thank you. Thank you.
If everyone wouldn't mind signing in, if you haven't already, that would be great. And we also have some feedback forms, if you wanna fill those out too on how you thought the luncheon went.
And also on the feedback forms, we ask about suggestions for future speakers or future topics. The planning group is actually meeting tomorrow, so we'll take a look at your ideas, and consider them tomorrow for planning more detail.
Philomena, I wonder if we should send out your flyer to some of our community people.
I haven't, I was gonna start distributing it a little closer to registration time, but since this was going, is there a listserv of?
Yeah, of all the field educators, you can send it to